Hi guys, welcome back. In the first part of this lecture, we got to know that there were many failures of the planned economy, the planned system. So, something must be changed. Then, here comes the reform and opening up policy. In 1978, and what was the result of this policy? The key elements of the China's economic growth we will discuss in this part of lecture. Still, let's start with a question. Did the reform start from the countryside or urban side? Can you answer this question? Although I cannot hear your answer, still I appreciate you will answer me. Well, here comes the correct answer. The reform started from the countryside, beginning with the poor mountain area of Anhui and then spreading across the country. Under the planned system, farmers owned the land together and they worked on the land together. At the end of the year, they got the similar output of the land, similar share of the output at the end of a year. Whether a person, a family worked hard or not, they got the similar share of the outputs. You could imagine such situation. So, it must be changed. Well, how to change? Farmers in Anhui province designed a new arrangement. Farmers were able to keep the land's output after paying a share to the state. If this family worked hard, the harder they worked, the more output they could keep. And this move increased agricultural production, increased the living standards of hundreds of millions of farmers, and stimulate rural industry. That's the results. Okay, when the farmers in these very poor mountain areas of Anhui province tried this new arrangement for a year, they really got a lot of achievement. They got more output and they got more food. Therefore, officials from the central government visited here and they found it was really a useful policy. Then, in a very short term, this arrangement, such regulation were issued as a policy and introduced all around China. Till nowadays, in rural area, this policy is still in use. Farmers in China own the use right of the land, and they own the ownership of the land together. That's the collective ownership in rural area. Well, the use right of the land in China is also a very serious property. It's kind of property. You can sell it, you can rent it, you can make money from that. Not only in rural, but also in urban. Well, reforms were also implemented in urban industry to increase productivity. However, the process of the reform in urban region was not as fast as that in rural. So, for a very long run, for around 2 decades, a dual price system was introduced. Private business were allowed to operate and they began to make up a greater percentage of industry output. While the policy of reform and opening up issued year after year, and almost for every year there was new policy, and in every sector of the economy. In the 1990s, the Chinese economy continued to grow at a rapid pace at about 9.5%, accompanied by low inflation. Well, in 1990s, the Asia financial crisis affected East Asia, and many countries experienced the economic depression because of this financial crisis. How about China? At then, China started to involve the international economy, but not as much as nowadays. Therefore, this financial crisis affected China at the margin, mainly through decreased foreign direct investment and a sharp drop in the growth of exports. However, China had huge reserves, a currency that was not freely convertible, and capital flows that consist overwhelming of long-term investment. So, the economic crisis was not a big deal to China's economy in 1990s. If we took 1980s as the stage of policy design, try the policy and to test them, stage of policy design and improvement. How about 1990s? 1990s in the reform and opening up policy, or in the reform and opening up process, was a very important, very tough period. The reform of state-owned enterprises in this period is very obvious. At then, the financial system burdened by huge amounts of bad loans. You know, under the planned economy before reform, both banks and factories were state-owned. They were like two pockets of the country. When a state-owned factory needed money for production, they got money from the state-owned land. That was not a loan. That was kind of investment. They got money, and after the factory made money, they handed in the benefit to the state. So the money they borrowed from the bank, the state-owned factories needed worry about to pay back this money, because the state-owned bank, the state-owned factory were two pockets of the country. It's the money just from one pocket to the other. But after the reform made the banking system and the factories more like nowadays. They changed the policy, changed the investment to low. When the money the factory got from the bank became low, it means the factory need to pay back this money, Although both the bank and the factories were state-owned. Therefore, it found that many state-owned factories, enterprises, companies couldn't pay back the money at all. The state-owned banks, therefore, burdened by huge amounts of bad loans. Well, when a company couldn't pay back the loan, what would be the next? The next is they have to be shut down. Therefore, massive layoffs stemming from aggressive efforts of reform of state-owned enterprises. The reform influenced not only the economic structure, the state of the enterprises, but also the lives of common people. In 1990s, massive layoffs, mainly in their middle age, they lost their jobs. When they were young, they thought the government, the country would arrange everything for them. Education, healthcare, jobs, retirement, everything. But after the reform of the state-owned enterprise, people started to find they must take the responsibility of themselves. Government wouldn't so they had to find their own job by themselves. It's a big change, not only in the economic sector, but also it changed the mind of Chinese. Well, at then, over half of the China's state-owned enterprises were inefficient and reporting losses. It was a tough time. But good news was, when we reached the new millennium, the most tough period passed, and the majority of the economic system had been changed from the planned economy to a market economy, which means China got the ticket to the international economy, to the international cooperation, to globalization. Well, after the new millennium, the society got more knowledge, experience about the reform. It's easier to be understood or accepted compared with 1990s. The large-scale privatization continued, and the number of state-owned enterprises decreased. Nowadays, there are still state-owned enterprises, and there are also some experts conduct research on that, and new policies issued on that to stimulate the development of state-owned enterprises. However, only in some very important industries there are the state-owned enterprises. and the state-owned enterprises of nowadays in the market system obey the rules of market, which are very different from the state-owned enterprises in old time. And when China prepared this market system to connect the world, China entered the WTO in 2001. And in 2006, the reform in banking system had finished, which means it was until 2006 China finished the reform in economic sector. So let's calculate how many years. From 1978 to 2006, it's nearly 3 decades. It took China 3 decades to achieve the reform of economic sector. The 11th five-year economic plan, which showed the direction of the development of the country, aimed at building a humorous society. You know, in 1990s, the most important target of the government was to stimulate the economic growth, try every policy to benefit the economic growth. Well, after the new millennium, when a group of population, when some of the people got rich already, the gap between the rich and the poor became bigger than before. Therefore, the main target of the government was not only to make the economy grow, but also to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. And in 2008 to 2009, there was a global financial crisis, started from US and then influenced many countries in the world, for example, Europe and Asia. Well, in 2008, China involved more in the globalization and the international economy, international trade than 1990s. Therefore, this economic growth, this global financial crisis, global economic depress influenced China much more than the financial crisis in 1998. However, Chinese government issued an economic stimulus plan to deal with it. A result of this plan is nowadays in China, there are more roads, fast speed railway, and underground stations, underground lines. So such rapid growth of infrastructure got financial support, financial investment from this plan. And how about nowadays? Shanghai held the Expo in 2008 to open a widened window to the world. And 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China and the anti-corruption from 2012. So the government began to have more targets, more tasks. And the 12th five-year economic plan focused on the strategic adjustment of economic structure, scientific and technology innovation. That's the new direction of China's industries, China's economy. And China approached the Belt and Road initiatives from 2013 and hoped to set up the connection of the Asia-Europe. Not only the connection of trade, roads, but also people-to-people bond. And it was decided to hold Beijing Winter Olympic Games in 2026. Well, let's make kind of summary of the economic performance since the reform. The slow retreat of planning was accumulated into a dominant role for market outcomes. And the markets for products, labor, and materials are well developed and increasingly competitive. And private enterprises continue to push into sectors formerly reserved for public enterprises. So, what did the reform and opening up policy have done? Let's have a look of the economic structure. Before the foundation, there were foreign factories, bureaucratic capitalist factories, private-owned factories in the city in China, and the landowner and peasants, farmers and handicraftsmen in rural. After the foundation, some factories left. Some were confiscated to state-owned economy, state-owned factory, and the private-owned factories, which were quite weak, were protected to be private-owned economy. And farmers, handicraftsmen became the individual economy. After the socialist transformation in 1958, around the 1950s, the economic structure became state-owned economy in urban and collective economy in urban and rural. Well, how to understand this collective-owned economy? A group of people owned the property together. That was the collective-owned economy. Well, in rural, it meant farmers owned the land together, worked on the land together. And in city, small towns, it meant a group of handicraftsmen were organized together. They made products together and shared the benefit together. Both the state-owned and the collective-owned were public-owned. Therefore, before the reform, China had an internal-oriented public-owned economy, which was a planned economy. What did the reform and opening up policy have done? It changed this internal-oriented public-owned economy to an outward-oriented economy with coexistence of various economic composition, and changed the planned economy to the market economy. Now in China, there are state-owned factories, enterprises, private-owned enterprises, Sino-foreign joint venture enterprises, foreign invested companies, enterprises, individual, as well as collective economy. So the reform and opening up policy changed the economic structure to make it more efficient. And as a result of the economic and opening up policy, We can see from this curve, it made a rapid growth of GDP in China, GDP of China, especially after China entered the WTO. And the per capita GNI growth, which showed the wealthy of people, also got a rapid growth. Before the reform, according to the standard of United Nations, China was in poverty. Well, nowadays, since 2011, China has become a country with upper middle income, in the world. And you know, China is large. And the economic situation are not equal all around the country. There are some cities are richer, some regions are poorer than others. So if we took some cities as example, for example, Shanghai, Beijing, and some other cities, these cities already stepped in the upper income group in the world. So you won't feel many inconveniences in such cities compared with the developed country. Even more convenient with the development of the internet plus economy nowadays in China. And the reform and opening up policies bring about not only the benefit of the economic growth, but also the improvement of the living standard of people. For example, the life expectancy at birth increased, and now China in the group of a developed country. Chinese people have a longer life. Okay, all this economic growth, economic development, as well as social development, what makes this achievement happen? There are several key elements of China's development. First, there is always a stable political environment and successive economic policy. Mr. Deng is the designer of the reform. You know, in the theory of the socialism society, theory of the planned economy, it was said that China, as a socialist society, socialist country, couldn't have a market economy, because market economy was for capitalist country. Well, there is a famous saying by Deng is, who cares if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mice? Well, what did this mean? It means if a policy could stimulate the industry, increase the economy, and benefit the life of people, why would we care that in theory it belongs to a socialism society, socialism country or capitalism country? Well, it's easy to be understood nowadays, but it was a very big step in 1990s. After the reform designer, the following leaders of China continued the reform. Well, in different stages, China China's economy and society met different challenges. Therefore, there are adjustments of the policy. However, to insist on reform, to keep open to the world was sustainable, was continued, was insisted by the foreign leaders of China. For example, the leaders of nowadays, they emphasize on sustainable development of the economy and the livelihood and the social justice. Well, the second element for China's development is the market-intensive mechanism. China's economy was changed from the planned economy to market economy. As we mentioned, it took a very long time, not by days, by months. It took almost 3 decades to finish that. And in this process, particularistic contracting was conducted, and the downtrack of price was conducted, and the privatization in process. There was a process of privatization. And how about the downtrack? As we mentioned that under planned economy, prices decided by the government, right? How about the prices under the market economy, which we are very familiar? You know, in market economy, prices decided by the market. When many consumers want to buy a certain product, the price of this product might increase. Well, when more suppliers wanted to sell these products without enough consumers, the price tend to drop, right? That's the process of how a market decides the prices, different from planned economy. So the downtrack of prices lasted for nearly 2 decades, which means in around 2 decades, there were 2 price systems in China. Therefore, for a certain product, there might be 2 prices. For example, if you came to China in 1980s, you are a foreigner. You wanted to buy food. At then, there were with coupon price as well as without coupon price for example, some food. Here I have an example. If you came to China in 1990s and you want to buy, for example, a steam bun, it was 10 cents with coupon, 20 cents without coupon. So there was with coupon price, the planned price, and without coupon price, the market price. Well, here comes another question, another element from another question. Do you know Shanghai? And do you know Shenzhen? Pudong is a district of Shanghai and the most developed region in Shanghai. Shenzhen was a city near Hong Kong. Which region was first developed? Do you know? Can you answer me? The answer is Shenzhen was first developed, first tried the reform and opening up policy. And this policy changed Shenzhen from a fisherman village to a modern city. And Shanghai, how about Shanghai? Reform started in Shenzhen since 1979. How about Shanghai Pudong? Pudong started to be developed since 1990s, more than 1 decade later, nearly 1.5 decades after Shenzhen. Why? Why this happened? If we have a look of the geographic situation, Shanghai has a better one. We mentioned that even in 1920s, 1930s, Shanghai was the most important city, the largest city in Far East. But Shanghai was developed later than Shenzhen. Why? Because at the beginning of the reform and opening up policy, no one was sure that this policy would make sense, would succeed. Therefore, they couldn't take Shanghai to try the new policy, which contribute nearly a quarter of the tax to the nation. So, a fisherman village was selected to try the new policy, and was reformed from all around China or the coastal area. After the policy was tested, succeed in Shenzhen and some other selected zone, then it was introduced all around China, all the coastal areas. What do you think? If you have been in China, it's easy to answer this question. You know, the first step in 1979, it was 5 special economic zones were selected, including Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, Xiamen, to try the new policy. After they were found to succeed, reform, more cities on the coastal area were selected to try the new policy. And then more cities in inner land. So it's a process from coastal to central to west. So that's the reason why there is unequal, unbalance between the development of the east and the west of China, the coastal and the central of China, because the coastal developed first. And China has a large population. It's difficult to make everyone get rich at the same time with the same speed. Therefore, let some people get rich first, then make people all around China get rich together. That's the design of the reform and opening up policy. Partly resulted from the unbalance of the economic growth between the East and the West. So, do you see the process? The reform and opening were not achieved in a short term, but step by step. And another reason for the economical growth, economical development, is the political competition. You know, in government, there are different levels of the officials. If one wants to promote to a higher level, he or she must win the competition with others in the same level. So how to succeed? To give a better performance in their job. in their job. So, as an official in the government, you will have to experience every level of the administration system, and you have to win the competition of every level. You could reach the highest position. That's the reason why Chinese leaders tend to, it's impossible that Chinese leaders were young people, because young people, you need time to experience every level, to work in every level of the administration system. Another element of China's development is the capital, both the capital stock as well as human capital. With the development of education, human capital more and more became an advantage of China's development. And in the process of China's development, urbanization is also a very obvious factor. And the urbanization is also a very important element for the development of the developing country. We can see that the proportion of urban increased from less than 20% to nearly 60%. In the same time, the infrastructure, the construction of infrastructure, improvement of infrastructure is another key element of China's development. And here I showed three photos to show the infrastructure of the commercial region and the infrastructure of transportation. If you have chance to come to Shanghai, you can make a comparison between this photo of the streets and Wujiaochang in Shanghai. It's really a big change. And the investment in infrastructure increased. And if you have chance to visit China, you can experience these elements almost everywhere, not only in coastal, but also in central, in west China. And the infrastructure in this part, China has the most advanced technology, technique, equipment, and everywhere in China. Each city, each town, each village began to nowadays have the most convenient transportation. Well, another element for China's development is the domestic market. China has large population, people with different level of income. So there are various markets, but large in the world. This domestic market is not only for Chinese companies, but for the companies all around the world. 2 years ago, the expo of the exhibition of imported products were held in Shanghai. So suppliers from all around the world show their products in this exhibition to find the buyers in China. And another element of China's development is the internet economy, internet plus economy. Now, in China, with the help of your cell phone, with a lot of convenient apps, you can buy almost everything, not only daily necessities, books, but also food and anything you want. There was a survey, and the respondents were international students in China. They were asked to give the new 4 major inventions in China. What influenced their life most? These 4 were the answer. And this survey was taken 2 or 3 years ago. And the international students, foreigners in China, thought the online shopping, online paying, high-speed railway, and the shared bikes are the new 4 major inventions. You know, in old days, China was thought a copy of other companies. Chinese companies were thought copier of other companies. But here I have another case. For example, WeChat, it was kind of like Facebook. So people used to say WeChat was a copy of Facebook. WeChat, an app designed by a Chinese company. But in 2015, when WeChat has had more development, there was a reporter had written a report that what Facebook should learn from WeChat. But it didn't attract many eyebrows because people didn't believe that Facebook should learn from WeChat, an app designed by a Chinese company. Well, in 2018, Zuckerberg said, if only I had listened to your advice 4 years ago. So now, many Chinese apps had its comparative ability. I think WeChat, TikTok, and not so, you may have very similar ways. Well, in this lecture, we reviewed the history of China's economic growth, China's development, and we analyzed several elements which influenced this development, this growth. After the whole lecture, I'd like to ask you again this question, which I asked at the beginning. Is China's development a miracle or not? Have you changed your answer or you insist? Please let me know. That's all for this lecture. I hope you have interest in that. And I hope in near future you have a chance to visit China. And I hope one day I can give you some other lectures on China's economic development, some interesting stories with face-to-face. Okay, that's all for the lecture. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you.